Earlier this week, tragedy struck Houston, Texas, with the deaths of 8 young people and dozens more injured and hospitalized due to a mass-crushing event at a Travis Scott concert. Travis Scott being the world-famous rapper and Kylie Jenner's baby daddy, known very notably for that edgy hustler aesthetic, which attracts a lot of high-energy, crazy teenage fans. Which brings me to, what is a mass-crushing event? Well, so many of Scott's young, energetic fans were desperately pressing forward to get closer to his performance, so much so the bodies literally could not fit anymore, and people began getting sucked down into the ground where they were crushed under feet and piles of other humans suffocating. To give one account of the tragedy, attendee Sienna Faith stated that there was nowhere to go, so people began to choke one another as the mass swayed. Once one person fell, a hole opened up in the ground. It was like watching a Jenga tower topple. Person after person sucked down. I began to realize at that moment, there is a way to die that not many know about, being trampled to death. I saw terror in every eye that I met. There was a floor of bodies, of men and women, layers of fallen people above them. I began to shriek. It's just horrific. Something out of Dante's Inferno, out of a horror movie. And it is no wonder at all that people left this concert stating it felt demonic.
It just felt like we was like literally like in fucking hell, bro. Like it felt like we was in a concert in hell. You couldn't breathe. You couldn't see. Like it was like help. The whole crowd was just going like help, help, help. And he just kept going, bro. It was like, that shit was scary, bro. It was so demonic, bro.
The entire incident blew up into a massive controversy of conflicting opinions. Thousands began tweeting occult imagery used to advertise the concert, some claiming this was a satanic ritual. Others rekindled images of the satanic panic, stating evangelicals and conservatives had simply lost their minds and were spreading QAnon absurdities again. Other arguments revolved around whether Scott, the crowd, or the event organizers were to blame. So what the hell, for lack of a better word, actually happened here? Well, I plan to unpack all of it, both the physical facts, but also the spiritual ones as well, because I think all of the chaos and partisan commentary on this issue has brought forward a unique opportunity to see through the fog and have a conversation about evil, the history of the satanic panic, and, a spirituality in the West in general in a way that doesn't have to be cartoonish, as I feel far too many conservatives have portrayed it in the past. But before I jump into this 100% demonetized video, I really want to give a huge thanks to our sponsor for making my deep dives like this possible, and that is Noble Gold. Now, not everyone is interested in precious metal IRAs or 401k rollovers. Some people are happily putting their life savings on the stock market or launching themselves into property investment. Others like the idea of cryptos or leveraged investments, all at what looks like the top of the market. What could possibly go wrong? Well, with the supply chain issues, inflation on the way, and unemployment climbing, isn't it all a bit risky? And don't even get me started on the $25 trillion of debt. If you've been thinking about investing safer so you can retire comfortably and sleep at night, it might be time to talk to Noble Gold about the tax advantages and other pluses of those precious metal IRAs. Of course, you might just love uncertainty, but if you don't, this month Noble Gold are giving away a free America the Beautiful solid silver 5-ounce coin with any qualifying IRA you start. Call them at 877-646-5347 or visit their website at noblegoldinvestments.com. All right, so let's start by unpacking the physical facts of the November 5th Astroworld Festival. The first signs of trouble were at 2 p.m. when festival goers began bursting through the VIP security checkpoint. Things seemed to settle out for a bit as other performers took the stage until about 8:30 p.m. when the crowd started to get rowdy, anticipating Travis Scott, with one attendee passing out and being crowd surfed to safety. When Scott actually began his performance at 9 p.m., police state within only 8 minutes, people began dropping. By 10 p.m., the event was in utter chaos. People were on the ground being suffocated, CPR was being performed by event staff, and even just random concert goers. An ambulance could be seen trying to make its way through the crowd. Fans of Scott's were even taking to the camera platforms, begging his crew to stop the show, shrieking that people were dying in the crowd. Unbelievably, those trying to raise alarm claim that staff threatened to push them off the 15-foot platform if they didn't leave them alone to keep doing their job. And they were even booed by other attendees for trying to stop the fun, I guess. It wasn't until the concert ended at 10:10 p.m. that the horror of what had happened really started to set in. Dozens injured, 8 dead, including a 14-year-old boy, and another 9-year-old child is currently fighting for his life in the hospital after being trampled. Just heartbreaking stuff. And people wanted answers, with many pointing their fingers to Scott directly as being responsible for this tragedy, a claim that I would normally dismiss as absurd, as a performer is not responsible for crowd safety, organization, ticket scanning, or security. That would be the event staff. However, it does become a performer's responsibility when they are actively trying to sabotage crowd safety, which Scott coincidentally has a serial history of doing, including even getting criminal charges for this in 2015 when he told fans to vault security barricades. And this is just not a one-off incident. In 2017, Scott encouraged fans to rush the stage, leading to a security guard, a police officer, and multiple others being injured at a concert in Arkansas. And most damning, in a now-deleted tweet on November 5th, Scott wrote, "We are still sneaking the wild ones in, prompting excess people to enter the Friday show without tickets." So, unsurprisingly, Scott already has multiple lawsuits against him for the Astroworld tragedy, and we'll see where that goes in a court of law. I can't speak to what he saw, intended, or didn't that day. But I don't think we need a judge to tell us his behavior in the past has been fairly yikesy.
Get that motherfucker, get him! Tried to take my shoe? Fuck him up! Fuck him up! Fuck him up!
Now, there's another dynamic to this whole story, though, and really the focus of this video, and that is the resurgence of commentary around Satanism and discussion about what used to be known as the Satanic Panic. Now, boomers and Gen Xers, feel free to fast forward this segment. As for everyone else, hop in the magic school bus and let's go learn about Satan.
Indeed, the Army does officially recognize Satanism as a legitimate religion and supplies chaplains with this guide for ministering to the satanic soldiers. Some charge that Army bases have become sanctuaries for devil worshippers. And the graffiti.
666, the sign of the devil. Over here, a bloody skull and crossbones.
The Satanic Panic was a moral panic in America over both real and unsubstantiated cases of Satanism and ritual child abuse in the 80s and 90s. Sadly, much like social justice warriors today, some people took a very important issue and turned it into a #MeToo phenomenon in which people were looking for kids that had been abducted by Satanists the same way they look for racist nooses at NASCAR events today. They wanted to find it. There were even cases where government social workers took dozens of children away from their parents because one child at their school claimed he dreamt of ghosts, a satanic indicator which of course implicated all the parents in devil worship. Eventually, after the courts found their investigation to be a mess and the claims untrue, kids were returned to their families, but some spent 3 months to 10 years away from them. There was absolutely an abuse of claims of satanic ritual abuse at the time. And it's not that it didn't exist, just reports were coming in at insane levels, many of which had simply no evidence to go along with them. I'm not joking. If you read the FBI report on this, it might as well say, bro, I'm not gonna lie, there are probably elites out here kidnapping and killing kids. Wouldn't put it past them. But listen, the problem of kids being abused is already bad enough. You guys don't need to make stuff up on top of it because you are discrediting real victims. In fact, as the US was hopping itself up on terror, Northern Europe was dealing with a very real, deadly satanic subculture that inspired serial arson against churches and even a couple cases of actual first-degree murder. This could be a video all on its own, but if you doubt me, the docudrama Lords of Chaos does a fascinating job of dramatizing it all.
He did it.
Terror has swept across Norway.
The police have described the murder as extremely violent.
Either you do it for the cause and you take action, or you do it because you want attention. You can't have it both ways.
And that's not even touching on people like Adolfo Constanzo, who had learned voodoo with his mother growing up and began to believe his magic spells were bringing success to his cartel in South America. So he built a cult following and partook in dozens of ritualistic killings so he could use their body parts to cast spells.
At a one-room shack filled with candles and other reminders of the devil worship that ended the life of 21-year-old Mark Kilroy, one other unnamed U.S. citizen, and 10 Mexicans. Outside, a scorched cauldron still holds the remains of what authorities say is human brain matter, animal parts, and blood.
In other words, there was a lot of made-up stuff in the Satanic Panic, but it was believable precisely because, at first, it aped genuine, horrendous, documented occult killings and crimes that were real. But that believability started to fade as soon as it became, well, a panic. Because the funny thing about panics is that their supporters have no sense of proportion. For example, during the Satanic Panic, we saw mass bannings of death metal and music with violent themes, anything with satanic associations, but also rock music, and more ridiculous censorship that even I remember spilling into the early 2000s, where evangelical communities would not allow Yu-Gi-Oh cards or Pokemon because they viewed it as akin to summoning demons. And by the same token, there were people screaming to ban Harry Potter from libraries, stating it was also a demonic threat.
And while I'm on the subject, let me say something about Harry Potter. Warlocks are enemies of God. And I don't care what kind of hero they are, they're an enemy of God. And had it been in the Old Testament, Harry Potter would have been put to death.
By going down petty and unsubstantiated rabbit holes like this, the Satanic Panic ended up discrediting itself so completely that for decades people viewed many conservative evangelicals the same way we view SJWs today, trying to conflate serious moral issues like slavery into a panic over edgy Halloween costumes. And like SJWs, some evangelicals chose targets who literally refuted their argument just by existing. For example, despite their mass outrage over her, J.K. Rowling actually considers herself a staunch Christian and based the Harry Potter books off of biblical themes.
I actually got into an argument on the subway and the guy quoted the Bible at me. That is not fair. Like, if you get to quote from your favorite book, I should be able to quote from my favorite book, right? He was like, men do not live on bread alone, Matthew 4:4. And it's like, everybody's a little bit magic, Harry Potter, chapter 7. It's not a fair fight, right? One of those books is a classic about a man who has sacrificed himself for the good of the world, and the other is the Bible. Do you know what I'm saying, people?
Roseanne, what are your thoughts on Harrison?
Well, I just love you, Harrison. You're fantastic. And you're real brave. I mean, the stuff you're talking about, Bible jokes, that's some brave.
Thank you.
And,
I disagree. I don't think the Bible joke is brave at all. I think if you're going to take on an entire religion, you should maybe know what you're talking about. J.K. Rowling is a Christian, and J.K. Rowling famously said that if you're familiar with the scriptures, you could easily guess the ending of her book.
huh?
Okay.
I don't like it.
I must say, I've never understood the Christian hatred towards J.K. Rowling. I know it's not all of us, I know that, but like C.S. Lewis had wizards and magic in his books as well, and they had pretty great Christian lessons. Although, to be fair, at the time, both Lewis and Tolkien had to defend constantly their use of fairy tales from critics. So, as such, in this, hypersensitive culture, looking for anything that was satanic, even when it wasn't necessarily there, you had innocent people, some of which even wanted to help Christian causes, getting caught up in slander and false accusations. All of which is to say, the panic looks silly in retrospect, but it really did hurt people and ruin lives. And, I'm sure in the future, we'll look back at the SJW stuff similarly. Humans are so cyclical, which is why we need to be extremely careful to avoid scenarios where individuals are incentivized to cry wolf or to exaggerate. If your cause is just, exaggeration is only the tool of those trying to discredit you. And it certainly worked in the case of fears over the occult and Satanism, which disappeared entirely from American culture in a wave of skepticism and disbelief after the Satanic Panic. But thanks to Travis Scott, we are finally having this conversation again. Why, you may ask? Well, Remember me mentioning people bringing up satanic themes at the Astroworld event? Let's take a look at some of those. So firstly, you have the entrance to Astroworld Festival, which is also Scott's album cover. A giant head with its mouth open, an image mirroring the Hellmouth, a depiction of the underworld entrance which consumes the souls that enter it, dating back thousands of years through Christianity and even paganism, as the mouth of Fenrir the wolf monster, or Ammit the Devourer from Egyptian mythology, who ate souls judged unworthy. Secondly, you have the event posters, which include occult imagery like singular eyes on hands, which will, yes, have many different meanings in different cultures, certainly in America is widely associated with witchcraft, palmistry, and magic. Next, posters depicting a man being sucked into a portal and the message, "See you on the other side." The other side being what exactly? Well, Scott's t-shirt showed blue people walking through a portal and turning into demons, leading to people even having theories that Travis was working with organizations to open a portal to hell.
Then the Travis Scott concert itself. No wait, this is a Travis Scott concert. That first picture I showed you was from a company called CERN, who was literally trying to dig a portal to hell.
On top of this, you just had these weird, creepy posters which said, "The true dystopia is here. When the end arrives, it's really the beginning." Pretty much everything Scott did to advertise this concert and his music could be summed up to exactly what you would do if you were trying to make people think you were committing a satanic ritual. And if that's not the prerogative, then you're just doing this all to be edgy. Which I don't entirely understand, because Satanism was edgy 20 years ago when Burzum were burning down churches and death metal was actually getting censored, but Satanism now makes coloring books for kids that are the top featured project on Kickstarter. When the Bible said Satan is the ruler of this world, he's really out here flaunting it lately. You can literally hold an entire concert covered in flames, demons, and hellgates, have people die at it, and the mainstream media will still be out here playing defense for Satan. My point being, you're not pushing any boundaries here, rappers. Now, I actually have criticism of both the left-wing and the right-wing reaction to this incident, but as I just mentioned the media, let's start there, with the Twitter leftists and journalists mocking all those crazy right-wingers pointing out demonic themes at the festival. Scores of articles have been published this week claiming that all the theories about Satanism are coming from Trump supporters, or the right-wing, QAnon, and even white anxiety, which, dear journos, if you think white people are afraid of evil spirits, I'd recommend a quick trip to Africa, or even just 5 minutes at a black church in America. Fear of evil spirits, rituals, spells, and belief in demons is not a conservative, political, or racial trait for that matter. I know for a long time people have tried to associate this idea of delusional fear of made-up demons with dumb redneck evangelicals in America. First of all, the Satanic Panic was only a short period of history. We gotta get more context than that. Faith and belief in good, evil, and something beyond the temporal realm is the norm throughout almost all of history, whether you are a poor peasant, uneducated, or a billionaire with a PhD. Most people believe in the spiritual. I'm sorry, Redditors. Edgy atheism has not quite made it yet. Reddit is not the real world, and even if it were, half of y'all believe in worshiping science or TikTok witches anyway. My point being, 76% of Democrats in America actually have been polled by Pew Research as being absolutely certain or fairly certain they believe in God. And in nearly every culture aside from the West, the idea of magic or the spirit realm is basically just a given. The same way we view gravity. It's just there, impacting us every day, even if we can't see it. In Tanzania right now, there has to be special protection by NGOs like Under the Same Sun for people with albinism who are constant targets to have their limbs hacked off by witch doctors for spells. Happening today. The current year. So when I see people at the Astroworld Festival saying they felt a demonic presence, I do not automatically assume this person is a Republican or a QAnon follower, because only people whose views of reality have been utterly rotted by Twitter would assume that. More likely than not, they're just someone in the majority of the population, right-wing or left-wing, who believes in the spiritual good and evil. And I can't help but wonder if internet leftists realize that when they mock the belief in the spiritual and evil, they're mocking the majority of their Democrat base as well. They are mocking the majority of cultures around the world which they pretend to respect. So honestly, for people who spend so much time talking about valuing others' lived experiences, dismissing people's senses of evil doesn't really line up with your stated values. Now, while I have just said belief in the spiritual and fear of the demonic is bipartisan in the real world, not so much in the political commentary community. I'd like to think whether you are a Christian or not, religious or not, you can think of the Scott concert and the events that occurred there as evil. Where I believe conservatives have gone wrong is identifying the superficial as what made this tragedy evil. Yes, occult symbolism can be hints that someone is a part of something demonic, as noted before. If you believe in Satan or not, occult sacrifices and satanic crime is real and documented. But the overtness of it all at the festival can almost distract from the root of the problem. The Houston tragedy was not evil because there was fire, rap music, a giant mouth, or spooky symbolism. It was spiritually sick because what really caused it was people worshiping money, power, and temporal distractions over goodness and care for their fellow man, over their own humanity. Intentional or not, people at Astroworld screamed that the show must go on as humans were trampled to death because entertainment or getting paid was more important than hearing out the people desperately pleading for their help. And if you get distracted by thinking that the symbolism is what is evil here, and not just maybe an identifier of it, then you can miss the sickness in every aspect of our lives, which creeps in far more insidious and hidden manners. This exact mass-crushing incident with far more deaths actually occurred at a football match in 1989, the Hillsborough disaster, which took the lives of 96 Liverpool football fans. It looked cheery and fun that day. There was no mouth of hell or fire, just a bunch of smiling football lads in a good sports game. And while I know all the investigations found no guilt from the crowd here, I can't help but think, if we as human beings did not succumb to the rat race of pleasure seeking so quickly, even with bad crowd control, incidents like this would not occur in the first place. This rush to be first, at the front, ignoring all that gets in our way, even to the detriment of others. If we don't recognize these core crises of the human soul, we won't recognize it when we ourselves are susceptible. It's been a tragic occurrence with youth today that in our education system, they're taught the Nazis were evil because they were racist. Yeah, racism isn't good, but that was not the inherent thing that made the Nazis evil. It was simply an avenue they used to execute it. What made them evil was their willingness to dehumanize others, period. That dehumanization was the root of their disregard for human life, censorship, authoritarianism, violence, and yes, racism. Just because you leave out the racism does not give you license to imitate the dehumanization, the authoritarianism, and the violence. To most people, this is obvious, and yet that very twisted logic is precisely how Antifa members convince themselves they are the good guys while they beat up old women crossing the street. They may be horribly dehumanizing and violent, but because the symbolism and the explicitly stated goal isn't the same as the Nazis, they're the good guys, right? No, not at all. So we need to actually root out what happened here to recognize evil in all its forms. Really, how many people on Twitter who reprimanded Travis Scott would have snuck into his show or other shows given the opportunity? How many people, terrified and caught up in the crowd and madness, were actually attempting to do the same thing as those around them who they were being crushed by? How many of us worship entertainment and escapism over our community and fellow man, make gods out of people who don't deserve it, act cruel or selfish every day? We've all got a bit of it in us. We're just not wearing the demon shirt to ring the alarm bells to the changes we need to make. Which is what makes this concert tragedy so complicated. Because both the victims and those who victimized were seemingly the same people, caught up in the same storm. Just some got out and some didn't. And to me, to view this story as simply one of pure physical, legal issue, finding out whether it was the organizer or Scott that had guilt, or to view it as this massive evil ritual out of control of everyone there, is kind of missing the forest for the trees. It's a culmination of a broader cultural sickness, one of consumerism, pleasure-seeking, worship of man, lack of care, abandonment of order, community, and self-awareness, a concoction of small evils we all partake in every day but rarely acknowledge. And if you want to take those forces and blame them collectively on a devil, I understand that. I too am a Christian, and I would be lying if I didn't see the real Satan's influence in the behavior of those at this event. But those of us who see the devil's hand in all the things I've described would be wise to remember the words of all people, Tucker Max. The devil doesn't come dressed in a red cape and pointy horns. He comes as everything you've ever wished for. And when you stop looking for a proverbial red cape and horns, you can start to notice the fact that people were willing to kill by omission simply to get a few feet closer to Kylie Jenner's baby daddy. Individual people who made individual choices to push forward without thought of those in front, to boo those screaming the truth, to keep the show going in the face of tragedy for a paycheck. You don't need a big conspiracy to see the evil in that. And if people will even, if just by negligence, permit evil over something that petty, we should be very, very afraid of what they will do when something more important to them is on the line, when something more important to us is on the line. The devil, who comes disguised as everything we want, will let us have it and soothe our consciences as we trample all in our path, including our own screaming souls. You know, as an extremely flawed human being who has made 1,000 mistakes in my life, I have been on every form of copium for dealing with the human spirit and the brokenness of our world. And one thing I have realized is that pretending evil isn't real will not save you from it, nor will pretending that it is some big conspiracy that is out of your control. We really have to realize, in my opinion anyway, that it is all of our decisions every day to give the human capacity for virtue room to breathe. I know the internet and the current state of our society likes to really fit people into boxes. It likes to decide who is good and who is evil. And we're all susceptible to that. But at the end of the day, I really do believe that decision is something we can make different every day we wake up, despite what anyone says about it. Even Travis Scott. Oh, spicy take here on conservative internet. But yeah, I got real into the weeds of the rant world here. I hope you enjoyed it though. This is a little different. I don't usually talk about faith or spirituality or religion. And one day I'll do a video on why I don't usually talk about it. It's a big one. But yeah, let me know if you enjoyed this and maybe we'll talk about it again.